Hello everybody, Mike Westfall here with McDonald Garden Center. I'm your garden guru and I'm here today to talk about how to attract hummingbirds to your garden. You can see me sitting here in this gorgeous garden here that I've set up, all of these great plants to attract hummingbirds. We're going to be talking about a lot of different ways to get them into your yard. Hummingbirds, of course, are migratory birds, so they come and visit the across the United States. So there's numerous plants. I'm going to be talking about some of the plants that we specifically grow here in the Hampton Roads area that will attract hummingbirds. But a lot of these plants work across the United States. So no matter where you're watching, some of these plants will probably work for you. If you are not quite sure, you can always check out your local garden centers. And of course, plants are one of the best ways to attract hummingbirds, but also feeders. And there's a couple other tips and tricks that I'll be talking about to attract these amazing birds into your yard. They are so cool. How fast they flap their wings, and they just look like they're hovering and they can move like a helicopter. They're just really cool birds to observe. And so that's what's so fun, is just getting them into your yard to observe. But they're also great birds because they're awesome pollinators. So they're great pollinators. They help cross-pollinate our plants so that we can get seeds that help feed other birds and other insects throughout the year. So not only are they, just fun to watch, but they're also beneficial to our environment. And so they're very important to us, as well as all animals. So we definitely want to attract them into our yard because they do great things for us. But they're also a lot of fun to watch. And I see Friedland said, I wish we had more species here. I agree, but they are still fun, and they're a lot, they're actually pretty easy to attract to your yard. So that's what we're going to talk about, is how easy and how simple it is to attract to your yard. And of course, plants are one of my #1 ways to attract hummingbirds to our yard. It's one of the easiest ways. It's one of their main food sources. So hummingbird feeders are great, and we're going to talk about that. But I recommend doing both for sure. And plants, of course, are the place to start. And it ranges. Plants can be anywhere from a shrub to an annual to a hanging basket. You can use them in so many different places, and they're a lot of fun to grow, not only for hummingbirds, to attract hummingbirds, but also just they're easy to grow, and you can use them in so many different places. So not only do they brighten up your life, but they also provide nectar and a food source for hummingbirds. So there's lots and lots of great advantages to growing plants, and the versatility is absolutely amazing. And so that's what I want to talk about first, are shade plants, because I think we typically think about hummingbirds, being out in the sun, and we think about a lot of sun plants when we think about attracting hummingbirds. But I wanted to start with shade plants because a lot of people deal with shade in our area. But across the country as well. So shade plants are really important to be able to attract hummingbirds to our yard, because if you've only got shade and you want to attract hummingbirds, you feel like you might be limited, but you're actually not. So here you can see hostas. Hostas are an amazing perennial that actually are very easy to grow in a shady location and get those long flower spikes. I'll show you some here in a minute. And then of course heuchera, which is right here. This one is an amazing plant. It's one of my favorite plants. Whenever I talk about shade gardening, I always talk about heuchera. Also, another name is called coral bells. Coral bells is a very common name used for that. Lots and lots of different styles in those. And then up here in the corner is bleeding heart. Bleeding heart's a good one. You typically see it early in the season at a garden center. It's an earlier bloomer. But some of those hummingbirds will migrate up this way pretty early in the season. And so it's nice to have something in the shade that's blooming that also provides a nectar source for hummingbirds. So let me show you a couple of these. Hostas are one of my all-time favorite shade plants. So not only are they easy to grow, but there's so many different varieties of them now. But the flower spike, of course, is what's going to attract the hummingbirds. So let's see if I can get this close. This nice big flower spike, you can see those little purple flowers, those light lavender flowers popping out. Those will open up and be tubular in shape, and of course attract hummingbirds and provide them some nectar. So hostas are a great option, and they're really easy to grow, and they get bigger and bigger each year, and they're perennials, so they come back year after year. Now, another perennial that I love is that heuchera, that coral bells. Let me see if I got one down here. There are so many different styles of these. This is one of my all-time favorite plants to grow in the shade, because not only are they easy, but they're also pretty much semi-evergreen. I call them pretty much evergreen here in the Hampton Roads area. In the summer, you might get a little crispy edges around it. In the winter, you might get a little bit, but really other than that, they're pretty much evergreen. And these guys just seem to kick blooms almost all summer long. So they're really, really easy to grow in a shady location. I love them in containers too. I love to mix these in a container, a perennial container with this and a fern and a hosta. I mean, you got yourself two great hummingbird plants there, but also great for the shade in a container or in the landscape. And these come in a wide array of colors as well. But the flower spike, of course, is what's going to attract the hummingbirds. Small little flowers, not a ton of nectar, but in the shade, if they're trying to cool off, then this is a great option for hummingbirds to attract hummingbirds. And they're just gorgeous plants. So not only do you get a lot of enjoyment out of them, but so do the hummingbirds. And then, of course, bleeding heart. Bleeding heart, I don't have any of the original bleeding heart, but I did want to show this one off because this one's really cool. This one's called Pink Diamonds. This is a bleeding heart. This is a newer one. This is actually one that's going to bloom throughout the entire season. So this is new by Proven Winners. It's called Pink Diamonds. And look at this bleeding heart. I mean, just love the foliage. Great little kind of blue-green foliage. And just look at all of these blooms. And this thing has just been kicking ever since we got it in. It is absolutely awesome. So this is a great variety. Some of them are a little bit easier, or some of them are a little bit more easy to find, I would say. The original varieties, kind of your bleeding heart, like I showed in that picture before. So if we go back to that picture, you can see up there in that top right-hand corner, that is like your traditional bleeding heart right there. But this one is really cool and really is super, super easy to grow and loves shade, and the hummingbirds can come flocking to this because it's got all these great little tubular flowers. Let me show you a close-up of those flowers. They're just really, really cool. Get it to focus there. So great option here for bleeding heart for the shade. Really, really good one. So I saw a couple questions popping up there. How much shade do bleeding hearts need? So they probably need about, I would say, afternoon shade. So they can take the morning sun, but they're going to need shade in the afternoon. Really, really helps. Are they deer resistant? Bleeding heart are deer resistant, at least as far as I can remember. Let me just check the tag and see if it tells me. Let's see. I don't know if this one's going to tell me if it is or not. I'm pretty sure bleeding heart are deer resistant. But bleeding heart are a great option. And let's see. I think I saw a couple other questions in there. Oh, the honeysuckle. Yeah, honeysuckle's a great one. We're going to talk about honeysuckle for sure. All right, so not only are those shade plants great, but there's even more. So cardinal flower is that big red spike you see over there. That's a type of penstemon. There's lots and types of penstemons out there. Cardinal flower is a great one. Cardinal flower is awesome because it can take a little bit of shade. It can actually grow in fairly good sun as well. So it's a little bit of a versatile plant. You typically are going to see that in your garden centers a little bit later in the season because they bloom a little bit later in the summertime frame. And as well as this toad lily here. I love that bloom. Toad lilies are really cool because they bloom a little bit later in the season, so it's a great option as well. And then fuchsia, you can see up in that top right-hand corner. So fuchsia is really more of an annual, at least that variety is. So we're typically going to find those in hanging baskets, and they're pretty easy to grow in a hanging basket. But there are perennial types of fuchsia that have come out now as well that you can actually grow in the ground that are pretty easy to grow, get long spikes, and the hummingbirds love them. And those typically, again, you're going to find in your garden centers a little bit later. So all of these are kind of what you'll find a little bit later in the season in a garden center. So if you're looking kind of, mid-summer, late summer, this is a great way to attract, because as those hummingbirds start to migrate back down south, they're going to need nectar for the journey, and so you want them to stop in your yard and have a source of nectar. And these are some great ones because they bloom a little bit later in the summer. So really, really great options here. Also, some other shade options are foxglove, as somebody mentioned earlier. Foxglove are a really, really easy plant to grow. Nice, tall, long spikes with those bell flowers. Foxgloves are poisonous, so I see a couple people mentioning, are these poisonous to my cat? The best thing that I can recommend is to go to the ASPCA website and just type in the name of the plant, and it'll give you all the information of whether it's poisonous or not. It's difficult enough for me to try and remember all the names of plants and how big they grow and what kind of times they bloom and all of that, but the ASPCA website is a great website to go and check out for all of those curious as to whether they can grow this plant if they've got a cat or a dog that loves to eat or nibble on some of their plants around their yards. But foxglove is a great one. Foxglove really, it just blooms, really almost nonstop in the spring season. They're super, super easy to grow. They get big, so if you're looking to fill some space, foxgloves are really cool. They are a biennial, so biennial is a slightly different type of plant. than a perennial. So biennial means that it'll grow one year and then it'll bloom the next year. So that's one thing to realize. But once you get a good patch of them, you don't really necessarily see that as much. And then, of course, columbine. Columbine is right next to me. Columbine is a great plant, great perennial, great shade perennial. And then turtlehead up in the top right-hand corner. Turtlehead's a really cool one. It's called turtlehead. I like the name because it has those looks like little turtle heads poking out. And those are actually a great source of nectar for hummingbirds as well. And they love the shade. So turtlehead, toad lily, you're going to find a little bit early or a little bit later in the season. Even with cardinal flower, you'll find a little bit later. Foxgloves are going to be a little bit earlier, as well as columbine. So these are just some great shade options, but I really love the hostas and the heucheras. They're super easy to grow. Bleeding heart is a really, really good option. So it's nice to know that if we're trying to attract hummingbirds and we don't have a lot of sun, you can still do it. You can still accomplish getting them into your yard. Pair some of your shade plants with a hummingbird feeder, which we'll talk about here in a minute, and you'll have great success about being able to attract hummingbirds into your yard. The next group of plants, of course, are sun plants. So this is the first group that I want to start with here are really kind of shrubs and vines. So honeysuckle was mentioned. Honeysuckle is an awesome one. There's lots and lots of varieties out there nowadays that aren't quite as aggressive as your native or your invasive species, I would say. So some of the newer honeysuckles are really, really good. This one's Gold Flame over here. Gold Flame is awesome. We carry that one pretty much throughout the entire year, or pretty much throughout the entire spring and summer season. But honeysuckle Gold Flame is a great one. It's not super, super aggressive, so you can grow it on an arbor or a trellis and feel pretty confident that it's not going to tear it down or anything. The one next to me is butterfly bush. Butterfly bush is awesome. Butterfly bush, hence the name, you would think attracts butterflies only, but it attracts loads of hummingbirds as well as bees as well. So if you're really into your pollinators and you've got a little bit of space, get a butterfly bush. Butterfly bushes are awesome. They're easy to grow. They bloom reliably all summer long, and they're just one of my favorite plants to grow for attracting hummingbirds, but also all pollinators. And then crossvine is up there in the top right-hand corner. Crossvine, as well as the trumpet vines, are a little bit aggressive, but the crossvine is one of my favorites rather than the trumpet vine. So the crossvine is a good one because it's not quite as aggressive. They can get 20 to 30 feet long. So, I mean, you could grow this pretty safely on a nice big arbor or on a fence. But a small trellis, you're probably not going to get away with it. You're going to need something that's going to allow this vine to really kind of grow. So crossvine is a really, really good one. Those big orange shaped flowers with that yellow tube inside really, really helps attract them. So let me show you a couple of those. So we talked about the crossvine here last, so I'll show you this one. Here's crossvine. So crossvine, you can see that big tubular flower. It's really, really cool looking. This one's called Tangerine Beauty. This one's grown by Greenleaf. It's a really, really nice variety. Like I said, not super, super aggressive like some of your invasive species, so you're not going to have to worry about it too much like taking over your yard. But crossvine is a bit of a fast-growing vine. It's going to grow, like I said, 20 to 30 feet high, or long, I should say. So it's going to grow pretty quickly, and it's going to cover some space, which sometimes that's what you want, right? Sometimes I've got this long fence, and I want to cover it with an entire vine, and instead of buying 20 clematis vines, I can buy one crossvine, and it'll fill it right up. So it's got its purpose as well. And then what else did we talk about? So we talked about honeysuckle. So here's a really, really nice one. This one I believe is called Wheeler Supreme. So this one is really, really nice. It's got this orange kind of tubular flower on it. Let me see if I can pull this a little bit closer without knocking everything over. So there's that honeysuckle. And honeysuckle, as I mentioned, there's lots and lots of different varieties nowadays. This one's a really good one because, let's see, I'll show you that right there because that'll show you that. Look at those little yellow stamens sticking out. So you can see that the hummingbirds are just going to love that tubular flower. They have a really long tongue that is great at being able to get in and get down those deep tubular flowers. And they like those a lot because they know that a lot of other insects can't quite get to it. So, bees aren't going to frequent some of those tubular flowers as much, which allows the hummingbirds to get to a majority of the nectar. So that's a really, really good one. And then, of course, I mentioned the butterfly bush, which I absolutely love. There's so many new varieties of butterfly bushes coming out. Butterfly bushes are, kind of the original, kind of sun pollinator garden plant, and you kind of really need one in a pollinator garden, but especially if you're trying to attract hummingbirds, it's a great one because it's going to produce blooms throughout the entire summer season. And so it's very, very reliable, very easy to grow. And because some of the new varieties now are a little bit smaller in size, you know, a typical butterfly bush is going to get somewhere between 6 to 7 feet high and wide. So if you don't have quite that amount of space that you are willing to give up for one type of shrub, this is the new one. This was called the Pugster series, and Pugster is really cool. This one, the specific variety is called Pugster Pinky or Pinker, Pugster Pinker. So let me show you that bloom up close. So you can see that long, pyramidal shaped bloom, and it just starts opening up here at the bottom, and then it will just continue to open all the way to the end. What's cool about the Pugster series is a lot of the dwarf varieties that you'll see out there, the dwarf varieties have small blooms as well. Well, the Pugster series has huge butterfly bush blooms. So I mean, these huge blooms on it, super fragrant, really nice fragrance, and it's on a dwarf plant. So you get kind of, this one only gets about 2 by 2, 3 by 3. So you get a nice small compact plant, but you get the huge blooms that you would typically see on a butterfly bush. That's why I love this Pugster series. And not only is it pretty for us to enjoy, I mean, just look at that bloom. It is absolutely amazing. But the hummingbirds just flock to it because there's nothing but all of these little tiny tubular flowers on that one bloom. So you can see, I mean, there's probably what, you know, over 1,000 blooms on each spike. So that is absolutely awesome. And the hummingbirds love these. So Pugster is a great series, but there's tons and tons of options for a butterfly bush out there that you can grab, and it'll attract a lot. So Shannon said, I'm afraid of butterfly bush. I have read that it's really invasive. Has anyone ever planted one? How did it work out? I really want one, but if anything's like lilies, I can't do it. So butterfly bush typically aren't super invasive. Some of the older species, yes, will seed, but a lot of the newer species won't. The seed is not viable. And so therefore, they typically won't kind of start to spread and pop up all over the place. So I would say, Shannon, if you want one, I'd get one of these Pugster series because the seeds are sterile and therefore it just keeps on blooming. And that's kind of the idea, or that's why people start to hybridize plants, is to say, okay, I want it to bloom, right? And that's what we want for our hummingbirds, but we don't want it to be invasive. We don't want it to take over our yards and our gardens. And this is a great series. The Pugster series would be great for you, Shannon. All right, so what other sun plants do we carry that will attract hummingbirds and that are easy to grow? So here we've got some perennials. These are some of my favorite perennials for attracting hummingbirds, and all pollinators really, but especially hummingbirds. Bee balm is that one that you're seeing over there, that red bloom. Bee balm actually comes in a lot of different colors nowadays. It's very, very easy to grow, especially if you've got a wet area. Bee balm takes wet areas very, very well. Salvia is another good one. That's what's in the top right-hand corner. Lots and lots of salvias, and now they're coming out in so many different colors and styles. You can get salvias in annual or perennial. I love the perennial varieties. They're grown in pinks and whites and that blue and that lavender. And then, of course, my favorite black and blue is an amazing salvia, and I'll show that to you here in a second. And then catmint, which is right over here. Catmint is awesome. Catmint is really becoming an extremely popular perennial because it's pretty drought tolerant. So if you've got a dry, hot area, nepta or catmint is a great one to grow. And there's so many different types and varieties nowadays. Some that get, 3 to 4 feet high and wide, and some that stay nice and dwarf and compact. So I'll show you some of those because they are some of my favorites. So the catmint, let's see, I grabbed the little guy here. This one's called the kitten around, but there's tons and tons of these varieties here. But this one only gets about 18 inches tall and can spread about 24 inches. So each year it comes back bigger and bigger, but these things just keep on kicking blooms. I mean, you can just see all of those little light lavender blooms. They are awesome, and the hummingbirds just flock to these because there's so many sources of nectar here on just one little plant. But it doesn't have to be a small one. If you like the bigger ones, look at this guy. This is another catmint. So here we've got two options of catmint, very easy to grow. You got your little dwarf series, and then you got this bigger guy. This one is really cool. This one's called Neptune. So I'm going to try and show you the blooms there. But you can see all those tubular blooms popping out of the flower spikes. And this one gets, let's see, I think it gets, this one gets 18 to 24 inches tall. So this one gets 2 feet tall. So look at how tall that is already. I mean, that's already full grown. And then it gets about 2 to 3 feet wide. So this is a great filler for a hummingbird garden or a pollinator garden. Catmint is awesome. So how do you spell it? It's catmint, C-A-T-M-I-N-T. So catmint, really, really easy one to grow, and works great for borders, but also for fillers. There's a huge diversity in the size of the plants, and there's so many new varieties coming out because it's just such a popular plant these days because it's so easy to grow. Some of the other ones that I mentioned there, let me go back and just remember what we were, so the salvia. So the black and blue salvia. I didn't bring a lot of salvias in here because there's a lot of options out there these days. But black and blue salvia, you'll always recognize because of this really kind of different leaf. The salvia leaf here, I did grab here, I wanted to show you the annual salvia so you always know how to kind of spot the difference. This is annual salvia, slightly different, smaller leaf, not quite as glossy. There are tons and tons of different varieties of salvia. If you want the perennial variety, just make sure when you come in to ask one of our garden experts whether or to show you the perennial varieties of salvia. But the annual varieties are awesome too because the annual varieties just kick blooms all summer long. So they're just blooming continuously all the way through the summer into the fall, whereas a perennial salvia will bloom in specific times of the year and will kind of phase in and out. So something like, I love that, even like a black and blue salvia, you can see here, is just leafing out right now. It really needs the heat. And then as it starts to warm up, all of these black spikes come out and then a blue flower comes out. That's why it's called black and blue. It is such a gorgeous bloom. I wish I could show you a picture of it. I should have probably downloaded a picture for you, but there's maybe you can quite see that image there of that black and blue salvia. But it's a really, really neat bloom. If you've ever grown one, you'll absolutely love it because it's super, super easy and it gets a pretty good size. So I think these get right around 3 by 3. Yeah, so 3 to 4 feet high and wide. Very, very easy to grow. Salvias are awesome, awesome, awesome plants for the landscape, but hummingbirds love them. So really, really easy one to grow. Just if you're looking for the annual you don't have to worry about as much because it'll just keep on blooming. Again, you'll have to replant it, but perennial varieties are awesome too. And there's a huge, huge selection and choice of different types of salvias out there. And then I mentioned bee balm. Bee balm, a lot of times in the garden center, you'll see it looking like this. So very rarely do you see them blooming in the garden center. As it gets a little bit warmer, you'll see a little bit more of them blooming here and there, but usually they go so fast, and I love to buy them like this because it's cool, it's bushy, it's really neat to look at, and as I mentioned, there's so many different colors now. This one's a pink one, so this is called Petite Delight. So this is a little bit of a dwarf size, whereas some of like your original bee balms can get, pretty good size, can get up to, I think it's about, 24 to 36 inches, so 2 to 3 feet. This one only gets about 12 to 14 inches tall, and it's a really, really nice one, nice and compact and dense. It looks like a little shrub, and then all of these little pink flowers are gonna come on the top, and they're really easy to grow, especially if you've got a wet area, but they can take it fairly dry too. So I mean, once it's acclimated, you're okay. Typically what I see in a drier location is a lot of the leaves on this inner portion here will start to come out. It'll be a little bit more spiky in nature, but in a wetter area, then all of these leaves stay on and stays nice and full. So you got to keep them watered if you're growing in a container. In the ground, keep it watered to get it acclimated. Once it's acclimated, it does really, really well. And it's a perennial and it comes back year after year. So bee balm is a great one. And the bees, of course, love it, hence the name, but so do the hummingbirds. Another group of great perennial plants, agastache, one of my all-time favorites. Looks like salvia, right? Looks just like salvia, but agastache is really cool. It's got this kind of really neat fragrance to the leaf, and it's just a really, really different kind of bloom spike, really, when you get nice and close to it. And agastache bloom a little bit later in the season, so they definitely like the heat a little bit more. So once we get into that summer time frame, you're gonna see more and more agastache come available, lots and lots of different colors, and the hummingbirds just flock to them. Lantanas we'll talk about a lot here. Lantanas are one of my all-time favorite hummingbird plants, pollinator plants in general, because they're so versatile. And I put them here in this perennial section because lantanas, there are perennial varieties that come back year after year. The Miss Huff lantana is our favorite, but there's tons and tons of annual varieties as well. There's some that are orange or red or pink or yellow, and the colors kind of always change within the bloom. Sometimes you can get just straight yellow types of lantana. So really, really awesome plant because there's such a diversity. There's some that get big. The Miss Huff lantana gets 3 to 4 4 feet high and wide, comes back year after year, whereas some of the other annual varieties might only get 12 to 18 inches tall, somewhere in that range, and kind of stay bushy. Some will trail, some will actually hang out of hanging baskets. So you got lots and lots of options when it comes to lantana. And then red hot poker. Red hot pokers are really, really cool plants. Grassy foliage with this tall spike that comes out of it. Really, really fun plant to grow. Actually, very, very easy plant to grow. So the red hot poker, this one's called First Sunrise. So this one's this orange color. You can get them where they're, this one's orange, but you can get them with the, that red hot. So when you go back to that image there, that's kind of the original one, and that's why it's called red hot poker, because it's red on the top and then it's yellow on the bottom. So you get that kind of bicolor bloom, but the orange one is really, really cool. And we'll get straight yellow ones as well. So let's see if I can get the camera to kind of get on that flower there. Not quite, can I? There we go. So really, really cool looking bloom and grassy foliage, really drought tolerant plant, deer resistant, easy to grow. Red hot pokers are so much fun. And then all you do is when this flower spike is done, you just go down to the bottom, cut it out, and it keeps on sending more and more. So red hot pokers are a really, really easy one and a lot of fun to grow. And they attract a lot of hummingbirds. So really, really good one there. And then, so what was the other one that I was, lantana. Well, let me come back to lantana because I think the other one was the agastache. So agastache you're going to find more and more as the season goes on. But let me show you the one that I've got here. So this one's called Agastache Blue Fortune. So Agastache Blue Fortune is one of the original varieties. Really cool plant. Like I said, loves the heat. But what I love about it, it's kind of got this minty fragrance to the leaf. So it's really, really interesting smell to it. So it's a lot of fun to work around it because you get this kind of fragrance kicking off the leaf. But when it blooms, it's really fragrant and the hummingbirds flock to it. And you're going to see bees and butterflies all over these as well. Agastache is a great one. It blooms all summer long. Really easy to grow. And Agastache is one of my favorites. Kind of, probably not as much as salvia, but it's getting closer and closer as more and more varieties come out of the agastache. It's a really, really good one. And you're going to see this a lot right now in the springtime frame in a garden center. You're going to see it like this. Again, this is how I love to buy them because then I know that I'm going to get all the blooms. But if you want to see the blooms, just come in, a little bit later or probably like late spring, early summer, and you'll be able to see all the agastache blooming in different colors, and you'll be able to make your choice and selection there. But this is a great one. Most agastache get pretty big. So this one I think gets about 36 inches. So let me just check my tag here, make sure I'm saying everything right. Yeah, so this one gets 36. So 3 feet high by 3 feet wide. Most agastache get pretty big. There are some new dwarf series coming out that only get about that 18 to 24 inch range, so a little bit smaller, a little bit easier in a smaller space. But agastache is a great one. And then let's talk about lantana. So as I mentioned, the Miss Huff lantana I think is the hardiest one. There's a lot of different ones out there that say that they're hardy. The Miss Huff lantana, at least in the Hampton Roads area, is the one that I will always say is going to work really, really well, and you are sure that it's going to come back. But I am really in love with these annual lantanas because there's so many different colors coming out nowadays. So you can see this one here where it's yellow. It's got the orange before they open, then yellow, and then it fades to that pink color. So lots and lots of varieties. I won't be able to mention them all. This one's called Luscious Berry Blend by Proven Winners. Really, really cool one. I've grown this one a lot, this orange one. I think it's Orange Marmalade. So yeah, Luscious Marmalade. So really nice because it's got all these different shades of orange in it. Really attracts a lot of hummingbirds because of that color. And then, let's see, did I grab another one? Oh yeah, of course, a hanging basket. So as I mentioned, the versatility, so if you live in a small space, let's say all you've got is a deck, porch, or patio, that you don't have a whole lot of space, but you want to try and attract some hummingbirds, of course, feeders are going to be a great option. We're going to talk about those here in just a second. But a hanging basket is a great way of doing it, whether it's a fuchsia or a lantana, lots and lots of different options, diplandenia, mandavillas, there's lots and lots of options there. And of course, the million bells right behind me, we'll talk about that here in a second. But lantana hanging baskets are easy, they're drought tolerant plants, they love the heat, and they just bloom all summer long. And the hummingbirds absolutely flock to them because all of those little tiny flowers in each cluster is what they're going to be flocked to, and that's what they're going to kind of get their nectar out of. So you'll see them humming around and checking out each flower and getting a little bit of nectar from each one. So lantana is definitely high on my priority list of plants to get because they're super reliable and very easy to grow. And then, of course, some annuals, some true annuals, some plants that you're going to have to plant every year. There are some great ones here. Zinnias are absolutely amazing. So surprisingly, zinnias you wouldn't think, because you're always thinking about that tubular flower. But zinnias are just one of the best plants for pollinators. They produce so much nectar. Hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies absolutely love zinnias. So if you've never grown zinnias, then you definitely should, because they're absolutely amazing, and you're just going to see pollinators flocking to them. Million bells are another good one. So million bells and petunias, a lot of people have some success with them, some failure. I haven't mentioned that one of my tips here is color. So of course you're seeing lots of color around me, color in these images. Color is important. Red, of course, you always think about, when you think about hummingbirds, planting flowers that have red flowers, and some people even say that I'll only plant red flowers. But while they are attracted to red, and you'll see lots of hummingbird feeders are a red color, they are attracted to red, but it's not the only color that they see, and it's not the only thing that will attract them. So I brought that image of that red million bell to kind of talk about the red color, but they're attracted to oranges, they're attracted to purples. Usually the more vibrant colors do help, so that's why I love like lantanas and zinnias and million bells and petunias, because they give you that bright, vibrant color that attracts hummingbirds. But they're also attracted to lots of other things, so it doesn't have to be red. And then the number one all-time of attracting hummingbirds is the kufia. Kufia is one of my favorites. It's a lot of fun to say because it's just a funny name, kufia, and it is kind of not the most amazingly showy plant, I guess I would say, but it gets all of these little orange flowers all over it. This one is called vermillionaire. Vermillionaire is also a fun name to say, but kufia is awesome. Again, that long tubular flower which allows just hummingbirds to get to the nectar. So you typically aren't going to see a lot of other insects or pollinators on it. Sometimes you'll get some butterflies around them, but kufia is absolutely amazing for hummingbirds because of that long tubular flower. It's very narrow and perfect for their tongue to get right into and suck the nectar out of. And it just kicks blooms all season long. So, plant a few of these in a container. Look at this. I grabbed 3 because if you pop 3 of these in a pot, you get all of these blooms right here, and the hummingbirds will just flock to it. So kufia vermillionaire is one of my all-time favorites. If you only want to plant one plant to attract hummingbirds, this would be the one I would recommend. I love lantanas. I love butterfly bush. There's a lot of great options here that I've given you, but if you can only do one, kufia would be it. And yes, you're going to have to plant it every year, but it is proven to attract hummingbirds. They absolutely love it and they will flock to it. So kufia is a great one. I mentioned zinnias. So zinnias, pretty much every flower that I've shown you has had that kind of tubular habit, that kind of where you can kind of envision, the hummingbird coming, get in there. It kind of looks like your hummingbird feeder. It's got that kind of tube shape to it. But zinnias are just packed with nectar. And there's lots and lots of colors. So these reds to oranges, yellows, pinks, purples, they're just so much fun to grow. Some people have issues with zinnias growing. They have this fuzzy leaf. So if you've ever felt a zinnia leaf, they've got this fuzzy leaf. And here in the Hampton Roads area, but really pretty much anywhere in the country, you might experience some powdery mildew on these. It's pretty easy to take care of. I always like to be preventative rather than curative. So I always give them a little dose of triple action or neem oil every once in a while when I can. And that helps kind of keep off the powdery mildew. However, I will tell you, zinnias, as much as, like let's say for like a cut flower garden, zinnias are a must, but they sometimes don't look so hot, right? And the leaves are kind of, not looking great, and that's okay because the flowers are there for the hummingbirds. For a cut flower garden, you're gonna strip all the leaves off anyways, but zinnias are one of my all-time favorites. Kufia, so Tony helped me out with the spelling there. Firecracker plant is another name for it. But zinnias, great option. You should grow some zinnias. They're really easy to grow from seed as well as transplants like that. Grow them in containers. They're a whole lot of fun. Mentioning seed, I want to mention these guys real quick. So you see a lot of these out there. These are a great option. So this is a butterfly and hummingbird wildflower mix. So lots and lots of wildflowers in here. I'll read off some of the names that are in here. So we've got crimson clover, we've got 4 o'clocks, we've got baby's breath, zinnias, cosmos, purple coneflower, Siberian white alyssum. There's lots and lots of flowers and wildflowers in here, and these are really easy because this has a seed mix in there, and it's got a filler that kind of helps, kind of keep that seed nice and moist. So you can spread this over an open area and get a wildflower garden growing. And it's really, really easy to do, really inexpensive. Just plant them, prepare the soil basically, clear your space, throw them out there, and then water it. And then you're easy. Just keep on watering until they start to germinate, and you've got yourself a nice wildflower garden. So this is a great option to do that. But as I mentioned, seed, zinnias are very easy to grow from seed. A lot of people can direct sow them right into the ground. I mentioned million bells and petunias. You can see here behind me, I've got these petunias here in this combo planter. So right here in this combo planter, I've got a mandevilla, which will attract some hummingbirds because of that great tubular flower. It's a big flower, but they tend to really like those smaller flowers. So petunias are a good one. Some people have success with them, some people don't. I have more success with the million bells because the million bells are usually a little bit more of a vibrant color. So like this one is called Black Currant Punch from Proven Winners. And you can just see that vibrant color, that hot pink with that dark purple inside with that little yellow throat down there in the bottom. And these are great options. And then of course, million bells are awesome in hanging baskets as well. So you can see this yellow one behind me, and they just hang and provide tons and tons of flowers. So Nanette, you asked me a question that I was just about to get into. Before I get to feeders, I want to mention just a couple other plants because those are some of my favorites, but I did walk around the garden center this morning and kind of grabbed a couple other ones that could be good options. I've had a lot of people say that they recommend them. So that mandevilla or diplandinias, you can just see that tubular flower. So this is a great annual vine. It is an annual, so you're going to have to plant it every year, but they just kick blooms all season long, and you'll see hummingbirds investigating these. I brought this also because of that bright red flower. So if you're trying to encourage more hummingbirds and you're trying to get that red color, diplandinias or mandevillas are a great option. You mentioned hibiscus. I did grab a hibiscus. I think I put it a little too far away from me. But yes, hibiscus are a great source of nectar. You're going to see lots of butterflies around these, and even bees for sure. Bees love to get in there and get this nectar, but you'll see hummingbirds as well. I'm going to try and get this hibiscus bloom right up to the camera because you can see those little tiny things right at the end of the stamen there. They're like these 5 or 6 little tiny nectar pockets there that really are great sources of nectar for hummingbirds. And hibiscus are awesome because there's 3 different types really. So there's the shrub type, so where they're going to lose their leaves in the winter, but the shrub stays there. So it's a deciduous shrub. It's going to lose its leaves in the winter, but it comes back year after year. A lot of people call those Rose of Sharon. Then there's the perennial hibiscus. That one is herbaceous. It's going to die off down to the ground. You'll have those stalks left on there. They kind of feel woody. They feel like the hibiscus might come back from that, but typically they won't. So you want to cut those off right at the ground, and then you get new shoots coming out of the ground each year. And those hibiscus get those huge dinner plate size blooms on them. They're absolutely amazing. And then you get your tropical hibiscus, which are annuals, but they bloom nonstop. They are super, super easy to grow, and you get these huge wide array of colors from pinks and yellows, oranges, the diversity in colors, and some of them with multiple colors. You can get the patio tree style, you can get the shrub, you can get the trade winds, which are really, really popular because they're a little bit more vibrant. These are great, great flowers for attracting hummingbirds, and they're a lot of fun to grow. So hibiscus is a great option. I also brought in Angelonia. I've heard a lot of people say that they get a lot of great hummingbird action around their Angelonias. Angelonias are really easy to grow. They get these nice long flower spikes on them. These are the new series from Proven Winners, the Angel Face. This one's called Perfectly Pink, but they look like little mini orchids, don't they? But they've got that great little tube down in there that the hummingbirds love to come in and investigate. So Angelonia is another good one. I mentioned petunias, so I brought a petunia in here. I tend to find that the dark purple seems to be the best one for me to attract the hummingbirds, but people say that the red one's better. You know, petunias are fun to grow. There's lots and lots of choices out there. So if you're just thinking about brightening up your garden, try some petunias. You might get some hummingbird action around them. Let's see, I thought I grabbed something else. Oh, pentas. So pentas are another good one. Great one for pollinators. Pentas have all of these little flowers, and some people say that these are great hummingbird attractors. So pentas, easy one to grow in the summer months. They love the heat, and they just bloom nonstop, and just tons and tons of these little tubular flowers all the way around this cluster right here. So you can see that one flower. And what I love about pentas is this red color. It's this crimson red. It's really, really pretty. They come in a wide array of colors. You can get them in lots and lots of different colors. But this one is just super, super vibrant. That really dark kind of crimson red kind of reminds me of like a geranium red color. But pentas bloom all summer, and they're awesome. And some people say they have great success with attracting hummingbirds with them. So let's see. I think that's about it. I think that's pretty much every plant that I brought in here. I think I've talked about all my plants. So those are some of my favorites. The list is huge. You know, there's so many different options out there that you can choose from, but those are just to name some of my favorites that you're gonna find in our neck of the woods here in Hampton Roads. Across the country, there's lots and lots of other options. The list is massive. It changes throughout the season. With any kind of pollinator garden or hummingbird garden, I always talk about checking out like a cut flower garden. Always check out your garden centers every 2 to 3 weeks at least, because seasonally, a garden center is going to carry plants that are what? Blooming. So when you come in the fall, you're going to get a whole different group of plants that are blooming in the fall. Just like in the early part of spring, mid-spring, late spring, early summer, midsummer, late summer, and then fall. So you've got lots and lots of different options to come in and check us out, and have your hummingbird garden flowering all season long. So a great way of kind of being able to kind of source those different things. And of course, always ask questions. So really, really great way to kind of pick our brains is come in and ask some questions every 2 or 3 weeks when you're looking for new plants to plant for your hummingbird garden. Next, feeders. Of course, feeders. So sorry, Deborah, I saw you ask the question there of are they full sun? Most of everything that I just talked about is full sun. So pretty much everything that I talked about, other than at that beginning part where I talked about shade plants, everything else was full sun plants. Lots and lots of options in full sun. Let's talk about feeders for a little bit. So feeders, of course, are an easy way of popping up. You can buy a feeder and make nectar, or buy some nectar, and you can attract hummingbirds with just that. I still say bring in plants. Plants are their natural source of nectar, so I definitely recommend planting some plants. If you can't plant plants, then this is your best option. If you can do both, then you're going to get the most success of attracting hummingbirds to your yard. So plant some plants and get a couple feeders. And I definitely recommend a couple feeders. I'll talk about some of my tips and tricks here in a minute, but you can see these feeders over here. So you got your classic style over there, that big guy over there. Some of them have built-in ant moats. I'll talk about ant moats here in a little bit, but you're almost always going to see a feeder that has red in it. And that's because we mentioned the red color does attract hummingbirds. So you'll see a lot of that, but what you don't want to use nowadays is the red dye. We'll also talk about that here in a second. But let's talk about feeders just in general. Feeders are really, really easy these days. There's lots and lots of different styles. So you're going to see a lot of these glass jar feeders. These are really easy to use because you just spin off the bottom. You fill this up with your nectar, and then you just pop this back on and then screw it back together. Tilt it upright, and then there you go. You're ready to kind of go and hang it and start feeding your hummingbirds. So lots and lots of easy options like that. You can get plastic ones, you can get glass ones, you can even get some really pretty ceramic ones. So I absolutely love these. These are really great gift ideas. So if you've got a friend or a family, somebody that is having a birthday or some sort of graduation or something coming up that you want to get them a gift and they're a hummingbird lover, these are great gifts. So these are really easy to use. You just fill them up, you pop the tube in the bottom, you hang it up, and really, really decorative way of attracting hummingbirds. And these are hand-blown glass, so you're going to get a lot of different styles too. This one's really cool, so I'll show you the side here. I'm not going to take them all out of the package, but these come in orange or blue or that kind of teal color. They also have a built-in ant moat on the top, so you can fill that with water and detract your ants from getting into your nectar. But lots and lots of different types out there. But my new favorite is the Hum-Yum and the Humbug. So let me show you the Humbug first. So Humbug looks kind of hokey, right? Kind of looks kind of simple and kind of kind of funny, but it's very, very easy to use. So basically you've got this little stopper here that comes down, keeps your lid from coming off, but all you do is just pull this off, and then you're going to see this big empty space here in the bottom, and you're kind of like, what would you put in there? You can't put nectar in there. You put bananas in here. So take a banana that's maybe getting a little bit old, or you can take a fresh banana and cut it up into slices, just one banana, put all those slices in here, go and hang it outside, close the top. Go and hang this outside, and then what's going to happen to a banana that sits out? It's going to get fruit flies. But did you know that hummingbirds eat bugs? Of course they do. So, and gnats are one of their favorites, and fruit flies and gnats are one of their all-time favorites. And what's going to happen is all those fruit flies are going to get in there. They're going to start to escape out of these holes here, and all of a sudden you're going to see hummingbirds just flying around it, picking it off. So it's a great source of protein. I honestly didn't know that hummingbirds ate bugs until this came out probably, 5 or 6 years ago. And I was like, that is absolutely amazing. I've seen videos of these in action. It is so cool because the hummingbirds just look like they're coming in and they're just picking all of these little almost invisible fruit flies out of the air. So the humbug is the original. And then they came out with the hum yum. So this is the hum yum here. So I won't take it, well, maybe I'll take it out of the box and just show you because this is my favorite. So this is a 2-in-1. So this one allows you to cut up the banana and put it inside, but it also has places for you to put nectar in it. So you can have nectar for that energy source for the hummingbirds, but you can also put nectar in it. So this just comes right off so you can see in there. That's where you're going to pour all your nectar into, so that clear area. And then it's got all these little ports in the top that they'll be able to drink the nectar out of. Then you just put this on here, you take this and you put your banana inside this portion here, and then you can open it or close it to allow as much. So if you just want to use it as a hummingbird feeder, just with nectar, you can close this off. But if you want the fruit flies to come in, then you do that, and then you just put your top on, and then these ports line right up here, and all the fruit flies will start to come out. So you'll get a ton of hummingbirds. It comes with a little built-in ant moat on the top here, and then you just put in your hanger onto it and you just hang it up, and you will get a ton of hummingbirds with this. So great way of attracting hummingbirds. That's my new favorite feeder, is the hum yum and the humbug. They are really, really popular these days, so you definitely want to come and check those out. So lots of diversity in hummingbird feeders, from pretty ones to functional ones to ones that attract fruit flies that are going to be a good source of protein for your hummingbirds. Now, of course, traditional hummingbird feeders are going to need a nectar. We sell the sweet nectar. Sweet nectar is one of my favorites because they don't use any of those dyes. So I mentioned don't use dyes in your hummingbird nectar. It has obviously been known now to cause issues with hummingbirds and is not good for them. So we don't need to dye it. If you're worried about the red color, or you want the red color to attract them, get a hummingbird feeder that's red. Then you can put clear liquid in here and it doesn't matter. All of the sweet nectar, hummingbird nectars are clear, so you know that they're dye free. They also have wildflower infusion. And I'll show you those here in a second. They come in a concentrate as well as a ready-to-use formula, and they come in these great bags. I'll show those to you. If you want to make your own nectar, that's perfectly fine. Just keep it simple. Don't add a whole lot. People are talking about adding honey or different things like that. Don't add honey. Don't add dyes. The honey and dyes, the dyes are bad. The honey will actually cause it to mold faster and be stickier and messier. So just use sugar. It's 1 part sugar to 4 parts water. That's a great way of doing it. A lot of people will boil their mixture, which is a great way of getting some of those impurities out of there. It also makes your nectar last a little bit longer. If you're making a home recipe for nectar, it usually doesn't last as long as like store-bought nectar. So just kind of keep that in mind. So those sweet nectars are really, really popular these days. These are easy to use. I love this kind of, wine bottle kind of dispenser, this wine dispenser. But basically you can just put this right on your, countertop, and then put your feeder right underneath it. You pop this red cap off, and then you just open it up, and it pours right into your feeder, and it's super, super easy to use. This is your ready to use, and then this is the concentrate. So the concentrate is a great option as well. This is made with pure cane sugar, so you don't have to worry about it. These people make nectar for hummingbirds. This is like their primary job. And so it's wildflower infused, and it's also got electrolytes. So obviously hummingbirds work very, very hard to get those wings flapping as fast as they do. So hummingbird nectar is a great one, and this one has those electrolytes that help keep them energized throughout the day and keep them hydrated. So make sure you get a good nectar. It really, really helps. Now, let's get to the tips and tricks, because this is really where I think some of probably the most important information is. So hummingbirds are tiny. They're very, very small. You can see there that picture that I used where it's in the palm of somebody's hand. They are super, super tiny birds. So of course they're worried about predators. So make sure that whatever you're doing, you're providing some form of protection for them. And what I mean by that is choose where you're putting your hummingbird feeder by knowing that they don't want to be completely exposed and out in the open. You do want a little bit of sunlight on your hummingbird feeder, but it's okay to be in a little bit of shade as well. And so if you feel like it's going to be protected a little bit more underneath a tree, then try that. We'll talk about location here in a minute for your hummingbird feeders, but just realize they're small and they're going to be worried about predators. So they're very, very tiny, so make sure you kind of think about that. We want to think like a hummingbird to attract hummingbirds. Clean your feeders. I can't stress that enough. If you're using a feeder, clean them weekly. I definitely recommend that. It's an easy thing to do. You're going to be refilling it pretty frequently. If you're getting hummingbird action, you should be refilling it probably every 2 to 3 days anyways. So just every time you take it down to refill it, I recommend cleaning it because lots and lots of mildews and funguses can build up in there and you don't want to be having your hummingbirds getting sick because of that. And then give them a little place to relax and rest. It'll help you enjoy them more. It'll keep them in your yard more. They love little perches. So actually hummingbirds can't hop or walk, but they do love to kind of cling on to something, a small branch. It needs to be the right size and the right space and something that they can see all the predators around. They'll obviously get into bushes. That's another great tip, is to make sure you've got bushes and shrubs, evergreen shrubs, like a hedge or just a bigger plant. Azaleas work well. Lots and lots of plants that kind of provide that really protective cover so they feel nice and safe and secure. They'll get in there. You won't see them as much as you will on one of these like little swings that you can plant, that you can use. So clean your feeders. You can buy lots of little cleaning supplies out there. This is a good one because it comes with a little foam sponge that is a great little size for getting into lots of different types of hummingbird feeders, but it's also got this great little bristly brush that's great for cleaning out the ports too, which is really important that we keep those nice and clean. So get yourself a nice little hummingbird cleaner set here. This is a really easy one. You can use a lot of little household utensils as well, household cleaning supplies. What I do recommend is just cleaning with water. You can actually make it a little slight bleach, very, very diluted bleach mixture. Some people will say don't use dish soap. Dish soap will leave a little residue behind. That's not great for hummingbirds, but the most important thing is to rinse it, make sure it's nice and clean. Just take a little bit of time. You're protecting the hummingbirds, you're keeping them nice and safe. So a little bit of vinegar, some people say works really well. So vinegar or bleach. If you use dish soap, it's okay. Just make sure to rinse it really, really well so that residue is not left behind. Also, I mentioned that perch. So we've got great hummingbird swings, some really decorative ones. So this one's kind of cool because you can hang it. It's got little leaves and a little, kind of crystal down here. So lots and lots of different styles of hummingbird swings. But this is a great place. It's the exact size that they like to be able to perch onto. It's a nice little protected space. Not a lot of other birds can get into this, so hummingbirds are gonna love it. So a nice little hummingbird swing is a great option as well. Clean your hummingbird feeders and realize that they're small and give them a little place to perch. And then, of course, ants are going to be your enemy, your number one enemy. So get an ant moat. A lot of people don't have problems with them. Some people will find like on a shepherd's hook like that, you won't get as many ants. Some people will use like a vegetable oil, like just a cooking vegetable oil to kind of coat that kind of shepherd's hook with, or even the wire hanging down to your feeder, because ants don't typically like to crawl across that. So that's one option. It's a little bit of a messier option, so I don't love it. I like to just get an ant moat. All you need in your ant moat is just a little bit of water. Ants don't like to swim across water, don't like to deal with a lot of, big puddle of water. So that's what an ant moat is designed for, is just to kind of hold some moisture around the top of your feeder and keeps the ants from kind of trying to investigate and get into your feeder. It's a sweet smell, so ants are going to be attracted to it. I also put that picture of that shepherd's hook there because think about location. So let's talk about location of your feeders here for a minute, because that's an important one. A lot of people, want to put them right out in the middle of the yard or right by their kitchen window or something where they're going to be able to see, and sometimes it works. But a lot of times they want that protection. Remember, they're small, they're tiny little birds. And so they really want some protection, and especially when they're feeding. They also, I'll get into that in a second. So try different locations. I recommend multiple feeders for another reason, I'll tell you in a second. But I also like to give a lot of different types of options to the hummingbirds. So hanging a few here and there is a good way of kind of trying out different locations. You'll find where they maybe prefer to go to a little bit more. Hummingbirds are extremely smart animals as well. So a lot of times people will find hummingbirds coming back to the exact same spot as they were last year to go to that exact same nectar source. So really, really cool that they can come back to the exact same yard every single year because they know that they're going to get their nectar source. But feeders as well. Some will come back to the same feeder year after year. So once you find the right spot, keep it. Just try different locations. If you're not getting any action around it, move it to a different location. You'd prefer some sun, but not all day sun. They like to be protected some, but they also like a little bit of sunlight as well because they're small animals and they like the sun for the warmth. And as I mentioned, they're small. Here's another great example. Their nest. They don't typically get into houses, so you'll very rarely ever see a hummingbird. Let's see, I think I grabbed a house here. You'll rarely ever see a hummingbird use a birdhouse. They do make their own nests. They make them there in the kind of the notch of a big bush, so they've got some overhead cover. So you don't typically need to provide them with a home or a nest, but having one nearby is not a bad option. Let's say all of a sudden we get one of those big storms that pop up out of nowhere and you want to have a place for them to go and hide real quick. Having something like this is not a bad option. If you do try to use this for hummingbirds, if you're specifically putting up a house for a hummingbird, get a small one like this for finches. This is a small little nesting box, so you want to make sure the hole is pretty small so they feel protected. And then what you're going to want to do is go put this inside like a bush somewhere. So you're going to want to put it nice and protected up inside of a big bush with an overhead canopy on it so that they go in and they kind of see it and they say, okay, this is a great option. You probably won't ever see them nest in here. You won't ever see probably them ever use it, but having it there might make you feel a little bit better. If a freak storm comes out of nowhere and they're trying to look for cover, they'll find it, they'll be okay anyways, but giving them a little place is not a bad option. You'll most likely find other birds nesting in it before a hummingbird ever really probably uses it, but it's a good thing to kind of have around. I mentioned the ant moats. Ant moats are great. You can buy these as separate pieces that have a hook on the top and a hook on the bottom. Really easy just to add this to any kind of hummingbird feeder. Most hummingbird feeders these days are actually coming with built-in ant moats. Just fill it with water. You don't really need to use an insecticide or anything like that. You just fill it with water. The ants won't like it. They'll go the other way. So really, really great thing to do there. Let's see. Oh, and the last thing that I wanted to mention was water. So, whenever we think about bird watching, we always think about, a bird bath or some way to attract the birds, and water is a major kind of option there to be able to attract your hummingbirds and your other birds into wildlife into your yard. But hummingbirds actually get a majority of their water source through the nectar in the plants. So they actually typically aren't going to drink a lot of water. However, like all birds, a bird bath is really designed to clean their feathers. And yes, hummingbirds do like to clean their feathers. So, but a bird bath is typically going to be too low for them to kind of really get into. So a lot of times what I'll do with a bird bath is I'll add a couple rocks in there so that when they're moist or as that water kind of level starts to drop through evaporation, they can get closer, they can feel a little bit more comfortable. But typically you're going to find hummingbirds going near moving water, so spraying water. So a fountain is not a bad option. A fountain where the water's coming down, kind of like a point in the fountain where there's a rough surface. They love to get around like a rock or a rough surface. You can actually use a clay pot or something like that to make it into a fountain. And what they'll do is they'll use that wet surface and they'll just kind of rub up against it to clean off their flowers. They also love misters. So you can buy misters pretty easily. Just set a mister on your sprinkler or on the end of a hose and just kind of turn the mister on during the hottest portion of the day. Keep it away from your plants. Out in the lawn is fine, but you'll see the hummingbirds zinging in and out of that. They love that. If you get some bolder hummingbirds, you might actually find them going into your actual sprinkler system if you got one that's set up for your lawn, or if you're out there watering your lawn with a sprinkler and it's got those bigger droplets, not a misting spray, then you might see some hummingbirds dipping in and out of that as well. But they typically like water or kind of water on a surface. So a lot of times you'll find mist like early morning when there's dew on the leaves, that the hummingbirds will be out there on a big leaf kind of rubbing up on the leaf to try and clean their feathers. A lot of people will take a couple rocks or a clay pot and just water it really good in the morning, and then that's kind of a wet surface. It'll stay wet for a little while and the hummingbirds will get on that and clean off their feathers. So they're not going to be really drinking a whole lot of moisture, a whole lot of water. They get that out of the nectar in the plants and out of the nectar in your that you're using in your hummingbird feeders, but they do like to keep their beaks and their feathers clean. They typically do it in flight. Again, they don't walk, they don't hop, they just perch and so it's kind of a tricky thing to provide them water, but mist is one of my favorite options. Just get a little mister on the end of your hose. Some people will use a soaker hose, put a soaker hose through a little section of your garden, a little weep, so that the water is just kind of trickling out every once in a while, and that's a good source of moisture for them as well. So that's a great little tip and trick there that'll help you with attracting hummingbirds to your yard. So those are really, it's pretty simple. That's kind of the short and sweet of it. So plants, number one most important thing you can do is provide plants, provide the true nectar that they really want. And then feeders are a great additive. If you're gonna do one thing, I recommend planting Kufia. If you're gonna do two things, Kufia and a hummingbird feeder. And then if you're ready to kind of really attract them, plant a bunch of different plants. You can scatter them in throughout your landscape. You can design a bed specifically for them. Of course, where do we all spend most of our time is in our kitchens. So we're looking out our kitchen window, looking into usually the backyard, could be the front yard. So think about where you're gonna be standing, where you're gonna be enjoying them, and start to plant some plants, but just get them into your yard. And then you can really get them to like a hummingbird feeder outside your kitchen window. But you might not have the sun there that you need, so you might need to plant a butterfly bush back in the backyard or in the front yard, or plant some lantana, hang some hanging baskets. The possibilities are endless. There's tons and tons of plants that the hummingbirds love, but plant some plants, use some hummingbird feeders, you'll be successful, try different things, and keep on working at it, because eventually you'll get them. And once you get them, they keep coming back, and then you'll start to get more and more. I forgot to mention one other tip that I just remembered. Because I was mentioning using multiple hummingbird feeders. Some hummingbird species are a little territorial. So sometimes you'll find that, hummingbirds are coming up to it, but then another hummingbird's coming in and kind of keeping it away. So that means that that is a territorial type of hummingbird, and that means you might need some multiple feeders, because he's saying, hey, this is my feeder, nobody else can come to it. So that's a great, another tip there is to have multiple feeders, because sometimes you need that. I've seen those long tubes that have like the 40 ports on it, and those work okay, but some of the territorial species will keep a lot of hummingbirds away from that tube and keep them away from all of those ports. So another great little quick tip there for you, have multiple feeders, because sometimes they're territorial and they'll kind of keep other hummingbirds away from it. So let's see. I'm going to get to all of y'all's questions here before we end up. I know there was a bunch and I kind of got on a roll and I wanted to get through everything. So I'll go back and just make sure I got everybody's questions here. Let's see. We talked about the bleeding hearts. Are they deer resistant? I'm pretty sure bleeding heart is. There was a lot of questions there about the animals. I definitely recommend. So Nanette said, is fuchsia annual or perennial? There is a perennial variety of fuchsia. Most other fuchsias are annuals in this area. And then I know people will asking questions about dogs and cats and whether certain plants are poisonous. I try not to memorize all of those things. Of course, foxglove is, I know that one, but the specifics on all the other ones, a lot of them are on that ASPCA website. Go check that out. It's a great resource for trying to figure out what are poisonous and what are not to our furry friends. And then let's see, Mallory said, I just bought a Coral Bells honeysuckle. Is that aggressive? Most of your new varieties, Mallory, are not super aggressive. So, so having a name like that on a type of honeysuckle is going to most likely mean, I don't know that one off the top of my head, but most likely it's not going to be really, really aggressive. It's really your invasive species. That really, I mean, nobody's growing those to sell. Those are that yellow one. Now, the unfortunate thing is that one's fragrant, and the invasive species is fragrant. So that would be a great way to tell, is it super fragrant? Most of the new varieties are not fragrant to us, but they still attract tons of hummingbirds and pollinators, and they're not super aggressive. Typically growing anywhere from, I'd say 10 to 20 feet in length. So they can cover up a pergola, they can cover up a fence. I probably wouldn't put them on a small trellis. On a bigger trellis, you'd probably get away with it. I also find that I like to prune my honeysuckle a fair amount throughout the season, keep it kind of in check. And then Shannon, I talked to you about the butterfly bush, how to spell catmint, we took care of that. Joy said hi, hey. Let's see. Debbie said, I harvested the zinnia seeds and have planted them this year. They're already popping up and some are blooming. Great. Yep, you can harvest zinnia seeds, and zinnia seeds the birds love at the end of the season as well, just your regular birds. How's Kufia spelled? I know Tony answered that for you, so thank you. Jamie also said it's a fire. She says, is that like a firecracker plant? It is. A lot of people call it firecracker plant, but they also use firecracker plant for a vine. So there's a firecracker vine and there's a firecracker plant. This is the firecracker plant. The firecracker vine is a little bit harder to come by these days, but that's another good one if you can find it. Kufia is a great option. Hibiscus, we talked about that. I bring mine in for the winter. I can leave them out. So Nanette, we were probably talking about hibiscus there. There's tropical hibiscus that you do want to bring in during the winter because they won't make it through. There's 3 different types: Rose of Sharon, which is your shrub hibiscus. The perennial hibiscus, which you plant in the ground typically, you don't have to bring those in. But then your tropical hibiscus, you will want to bring in during the winter. And then Deborah, we talked about full sun. Most of the plants I talked about were full sun, other than the beginning there where I talked about some of the shade plants. Let's see. Nanette said I have 3 and they are very territorial. See them chasing each other all the time. So Nanette, you might want to try getting another couple hummingbird feeders out there so they can all have their own. Sybil said, when I water hanging plants, how can I keep all the water from draining out? Sybil, great question. I've done lots of watering videos in the past and how to water, and watering is a tricky one, and it's something that I still learn from every time that I go out there and water. Watering so that the moisture doesn't come out the bottom is a tricky one, and it really depends on the hanging basket itself. So let's see, let me grab this one just to show you. So great looking hanging basket. When you water, try and keep the water off the leaves. We don't want to saturate the entire top of the plant. That's number 1. 2, we don't want to ever let it get super, super dry. So when it dries out completely, then when you water it, all the water is going to gush out the bottom because there's no way for the moisture to get into the soil. It's going to take multiple waterings. And if that's the case, if you let it dry out a little bit too much, then you're going to have to water. I usually take mine down, put it on the ground, water it and it's going to take 2 or 3 or 4 waterings before you loosen that soil back up to allow moisture to get in there. If you keep it kind of evenly moist, which is one of my favorite words in gardening, evenly moist, because what plant wouldn't like that, then you're gonna be better off. And the best way to do that is by weight. And so every once in a while, just go and kind of lift it up a little bit, check the weight. Okay, it's starting to lighten it up now, but it's still got a little bit of moisture in there, so great time to water. Then what you wanna do is just water it, and then stop, and don't water until the water drains out. A lot of people will water their hanging baskets until they see the water just pouring out the bottom, and they assume they've got it well. Well, the problem with that is all the nutrients are coming pouring out the bottom too, so you're gonna need to feed more. So what we're trying to do is water it. A lot of times, when you water a hanging basket, this is a 10-inch pot. You can get them 10, 12, 14-inch pots typically. You're gonna water for a normal watering with a hose, with it kind of almost on full steam. You're probably on a hanging basket for like 10 seconds, no more than that. Once you get past that, you're probably putting in too much water and it's going to start pouring out the bottoms. So great question. I can't give you a specific answer other than to say keep trying, and then check the weight. So give it a little bit of water, check the weight. This basket's nice and heavy. I can feel it. It's got plenty of moisture in it. So I know I don't need to water it. But as it starts to lighten up, I'll give it a little bit more moisture, a little bit more water, and I always push myself to try not to water a hanging basket to the point where the water is gushing out the bottom. Great question. Long answer. Sorry for my long answer. But it's a great question because it's something that I always challenge myself when I'm watering. Can I get it enough water and not have all that water run out the bottom, because all the nutrients are coming out and then I'm fertilizing more, and so I want to keep that water in there. The best thing to do is not let it dry out in the first place as best you possibly can. You don't want to overwater it either, which means you're just constantly giving it water because you're trying not to let it dry out. So tricky one, keep trying. You'll eventually figure it out. It just takes a little bit of, I kind of make it a game. Can I get this right? So every time I go out there, I'm trying to see if I can get it perfect. And Annette said I have 3 hummingbird feeders, so he's chasing them away from all of them. So that's a tricky one. They're definitely territorial there, but he likes your yard, and it's probably a lot of fun to watch them dipping and diving all over the place. Get more plants, buy more plants. We got plenty of plants that you can bring into your yard that will keep those hummingbirds active and energized throughout their day. So I hope you all enjoy this. I hope you all come in and see us if you're in our neck of the woods, to come and buy some of these great plants, great feeders. feeders, great options. I hope the tips and tricks helped you. It's really important that we protect our hummingbirds and keep them coming back to our yards because they're fun to watch, but they're also important to the livelihood of lots of other animals and to our plants, and keeps us going. So love those hummies. Thank you, Nanette, and love the hummingbirds, and I had a lot of fun talking to you about them today. I hope you all enjoyed this, and we hope to see you here at the Garden Center soon. So thank you all for joining, and we'll see you around. Bye, everybody.